Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to all our new subscribers. We really appreciate you coming on board our journey, and for everyone who's watched so far. It's a beautiful day here in central Portugal. Someone said, can you stop filming when it's really beautiful?
Yeah, all right.
Sorry. No. We're lucky we've had a lot of sunny days, so it's just pure luck. It's been sunshine on the days.
Yeah, no, we have been very lucky.
We've been filming. But anyway, this week we're going to do a Q&A video. Thank you for all your questions, and we're going to do those Q&As in different locations around this area so you can see some of the beautiful sights as well. So we hope you enjoy it.
Hi and welcome to our first location. This is the Marina de Aguera, which is local to us, and as you can see behind me there's a whole load of pontoons basically for the boats. Now it's quite empty at the moment because we're not in the season, but this place is absolutely thriving during the summer. Lots of water sports going on in this absolutely fantastic lake river setting that we have here. Up on the hill we have the Montebello Aguera Resort, which is a spa and a hotel, and that is wedged full of people during the summer also. So this is our first location, and we'll answer the first couple of questions right here. Our first question is about getting a NISS, which is your Portuguese social security number. Now it seems that lots of immigrants have problems getting hold of this once they become residents here. There's an online system where you go in and you fill out some details, you send it off. But what happens a lot of the time, it just keeps bouncing back and back and back, and it's asking for more information which you're unable to give. Now, part of the reason could be because you're using Translate on the website, and that causes a bit of a glitch in the system. There's also talk from some quarters around the fact that if you are retired or not declaring any tax income, then there's a glitch in the system which stops you applying. So we certainly expect that to rectify itself. I say for us, I'm a new resident, and so once I put in my first tax return, we're thinking that that is going to correct that, because as soon as I start giving the government money, I'm pretty sure they're going to give me a social security number. So we're just going to keep on trying on that front. So which leads me on to our next question, which is about use of language in Portugal. So we talk about that Translate, but another question was around, do you need to learn Portuguese? If you're in the major cities or any of the big cities, you know, Porto, Lisbon, Coimbra, then pretty much anywhere you go, then English is going to get you by. However, I just think it's a courtesy if you're moving to a country to at least attempt to learn the language, or some of the basic phrases or basic parts of that language which are going to make your life and other people's life easier. We are learning Portuguese, we are learning it slowly, but we are integrating ourselves with a lot of Portuguese people, so that hopefully makes it a little bit easier. So you don't need it in the big cities, but in the rural areas where we live, it certainly helps to know some Portuguese.
So we're actually in a place called Bussaço Ridge, which is near the beautiful town of Luso. And this monument that you see in the background was created to commemorate the 1810 Battle of the Anglo-Portuguese and the French for the Battle of Bussaço. It's quite famous, and every year they recreate the battle, and you can come and watch it if you're into that sort of thing, which Gary is. I'm definitely not, but it is a very beautiful area. So we've had two questions that are quite similar. One question's from the USA and one's from Great Britain. So I'll have to answer them slightly differently because there are sort of different things that I would recommend. And that question is, what should we bring? In fact, one of them is from Canada as well. There's 3 questions on this subject. What should we bring with us? Gary will link our video from last week here, which does actually answer the question if you haven't seen that yet. But here's my advice. If you're coming from the UK, we brought everything with us, and we used a professional moving company who took care of all the paperwork for us. And the reason I took everything is because tools are expensive here, DIY materials are expensive here, furniture's quite expensive here, and if you like older things, vintage things, art pieces, it's very, very hard to recreate what we had in the UK. So we took everything, and the cost of that cost us £2,500, and there is no way that we could have replaced everything that we bought over here. So if you're coming from the UK, that is my advice. If you're coming from the USA or Canada, you can get shipping containers that are reasonably priced, and again, they take care of all the paperwork for you. So really it's personal choice as to whether you bring everything, can bring all your furniture or not. But it is obviously going to cost more, and it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So yeah, I think for the UK it's easy. For the USA, Canada, you've really got to weigh up if you want to bring all that stuff with you.
Wow. Our second location today is the Barragem de Aguera, which is this behind me, which is a dam. Okay, so where we were earlier at the marina, the body of water that marina sits on is being held by this huge dam here. Now, excuse me for referring to my notes, but it is 89 meters tall, 400 meters long or wide, and it is what's known as a multi-arch dam. There are lots of these in Portugal, but this is quite a spectacular one, and it's just a few minutes down the road from where we live. Now, the amount of water that holds in, this is on the Mondego, okay, and the amount of water that holds in the reservoir at the top is something akin to a maximum of 423 million cubic meters, which is quite phenomenal when you think about it. But as dams go, this is pretty impressive, and it never ceases to amaze me. Such a feat of engineering, and the Portuguese are absolutely fantastic at this. So our next couple of questions are around residency. Now that is residency for humans and also residency for dogs. I'll tackle the humans first. Okay, so in order to get residency here, then there are lots of different ways to do it, but we'll talk about how we did it. Shelley she holds an Irish passport, so she is an EU citizen. That made the process for her quite a bit more simple. She could go to the local Câmara, which is the local town hall in Mortágua, after speaking to someone at our freguesia, Junta de Freguesia, which is the parish hall, and she managed to get what's called a CRU, which is essentially a residency certificate. Now, that was fairly straightforward. Yeah, you've just got to do the bits in order that you have to do, and then it's issued. That's it, fairly straightforward. That's if you're an EU citizen. If you're not an EU citizen, then it can be slightly different. We'll talk about how we did it. So in my case, because I'm married to Shelley as an EU citizen who has residency here, then there's an article within the EU legislation which means that under reunification I can gain residency in Portugal. Now that sounds quite simple and straightforward, but it's not, because you have to go through an organisation called AIMA, A-I-M-A, and they are essentially the people that oversee all the immigration into Portugal. It used to be called CEF, and it changed over to AIMA, And in that process, they've obviously changed a lot of things, and I think that they're under a lot of stress. They have a high workload, and they're trying to get that all sorted so that they can get people their residency statuses, etc. So there are lots of anecdotal stories about people who applied to renew residency status and have maybe been waiting 6 months or longer to try and get an appointment to get that renewed. So these are people that already have residency, cannot get it renewed. In my case, it was simply a case of getting a friend of Shelley's who happens to be an immigration lawyer to help us because we weren't getting any joy. We probably applied a little bit later than we should have, and we weren't getting any joy in getting an appointment with IMA. So with the help of this immigration lawyer, essentially we managed to get an appointment. Now you'd think, living where we are in central Portugal, that would be easy, we just go to the nearest city. No, the appointment is where they want you to go to. Now I was lucky enough not to have to go to the Algarve, because that's a very long way, but I had to go up to a city called Bragança, which is in the northeast of the country. It's about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive from where we live. We had to go there twice. I'll save the whole story for another time, but I had to go there twice. And even after 2 appointments with them, we walked away still not knowing whether I would have my residency or not. My residency actually, probably about 2 months after our last appointment, came through in the post. We got a letter, I opened it up, and there it was, all done. So it was all good in the end. But it is a difficult process. It can be a difficult process. There's obviously other ways to do it. D7 visas, retired people have got different ways to do it. Digital nomads have got different ways to do it. So it's worth investigating that in depth to find out what is the best way for you to try and get residency. Now the second point was around dogs and bringing dogs to Portugal. So what you'll probably have to do depends on where you're coming from. So I will quote the UK as an example. We brought our dogs from the UK to Portugal. To bring them into Europe, we had to get a certificate, essentially a pet passport from our vet in the UK, which said that all its jabs are up to date, rabies, etc., which is very important. That allowed for entry into the EU, and then once you're in the EU, depending on which country you go to, obviously Portugal is very similar to a lot of the main countries in the EU, that you can go into those countries off the back of that passport that you've got. And my recommendation is, once you've actually got to Portugal, is you then find a vet, sign up with a vet, and get your dogs an EU pet passport. Because once you're here and you've got that, then that allows you to travel quite freely around the EU with some restrictions. You have to check each country's requirements, but you can travel around the EU with your pet. I hope that helps.
Okay, so this cross behind, which is called Cruz Alto, High Cross, is actually the highest point in Bussaço Forest. Absolutely stunning views from here, and this is really a landmark of religious significance, and a wonderful place to just take in the pure beauty of this part of central Portugal. So the first question is about using a realtor or an estate agent, depending on what side of the pond you come from. Now, I think the first thing to know here is that realtors are generally interested in their own properties, and there are very, very few buyer's agents. And if anyone tries to sell you services as a buyer's agent, check their credentials very carefully. Realtors or estate agents only deal with the properties that they've got for sale, or that are within their kind of chain of, estate agents or realtors chains. So you can't just go and get the services of a realtor and see everything that's on the market. So my very best advice is, if you're buying a house, is look at everything on the market, contact several realtors, look at private homes for sale as well. Don't rely on one person, because they're only going to show you what they want to show you, and they're not all particularly truthful. So I'd be very, very careful. Have a broad range. So the second question that was asked along this vein about buying a home is, what are the things that I should look out for? And there is no doubt that you need to be very careful when buying a property, and we will do a more in-depth video about this at some point. But let me just give you some sort of top tips to start with. First of all, check a house has a habitation license. If it doesn't have a habitation license, walk away unless the house is registered before 1951. Then you're okay. It doesn't need a habitation license. A lot of people say, oh, I've seen this dream property, it's got no habitation license. Honestly, the pain of getting a habitation license can be quite extensive. So by all means, if you've got years to waste because that's the house of your dreams, then pursue it. But otherwise, get the seller to register the house, get the habitation license, and don't deal with it yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing is find an independent avocado, they're called in Portugal, which is a lawyer or a solicitor, will be other terms that are used. Always use an independent one that's been recommended to you by someone you know or trust. Do not use the avocado that has been recommended by an estate agent or a realtor or someone who's interested in selling you a property. So make sure that you carefully check their credentials. That person should check there's no debt on the house, check that there's no bad history, and they'll do basic things, but they do not protect you the same way that you get protected in the UK or the US when you're buying a house. Now, if you're buying a house with a mortgage, you get a little bit more protection because the mortgage companies will do detailed checks to make sure every part of that house matches what is stated on the records. So that's a key thing. But most people are not buying with a mortgage potentially, so that can cause a problem. Also, there are two very important documents, the tax document and the property document. Gary will put the names up on the screen. You need to check that what is on those documents is what you see in the property. So have a look at what's laid out in terms of the property, the land registry document, and check that you can see everything. Common one, a lot of pools have no license and no planning permission. So always check those. And when you go to view a property, ask loads and loads of questions. Has this extension been put on recently? You know, when were these windows put in? Just ask loads of questions because it will unearth things that you need to check. But those are, without a doubt, the key things that you need to check when buying. Be careful. Lots of people get caught out with buying things they were told, oh, that bit of land's attached to this property, you own up to that tree. And then they find they don't own up to that tree. So land borders are critical. The final thing, always make sure, if you can, to get a surveyor. A surveyor, they're not that easy to find. Again, you need to ask around, but a surveyor will go and check a property and tell you all the things that you need to be aware of. And so we thoroughly recommend that, but make sure they're qualified to be a surveyor, because we got caught out with a cowboy, someone calling themselves a surveyor and they were just a builder. So surveyors, very critical.
Welcome to our last location on this Q&A session. We are at the top here of the Serra da Atalhada, which is a mountain range here, and we have Munhos is what they're called, which is mills. Now, I don't know how many there are. There are quite a few all the way along here. We haven't got them all in shot, but they're up on this mountain ridge here. I mean, the views are magnificent because you're right on the mountain top. We're between Penacova and Villanova de Poiras. And on one side behind me, we have the Serra de Caramulo, which is our local mountain range from where we live. This is about 30 minutes from where we live. On the other side, you have the mountain range which leads into the Serra da Estrela, which is the tallest mountain range in Portugal. So it's just, on a clear day, it is just absolutely magnificent to be here. So our last question, any tips on car buying? Because the person that asked the question has heard that cars are very expensive to buy here. So let's just draw a very quick distinction. If you're buying a new car here from a dealership, you know, a major brand dealership, then the cost is probably not going to be that dissimilar to anywhere else in Europe, or possibly where you've come from. So new cars is less of an issue because you're going to pay IVA, you're going to pay the tax on that anyway, and you're going to pay it in Portugal. So new cars, similar. Now, used cars is a completely different matter. So if you are buying a used car in Portugal, then they do tend to retain their value a lot more than other places, certainly in Europe and possibly further afield. One of the reasons that we're quoted is because they don't rot. Like in Northern Europe, for example, in the UK where we come from, every winter for 3-4 months there'll be salt in the roads, and obviously that is not good for your vehicle and just all the weather that's thrown at it. But here they don't tend to have the same issues, so cars tend to last longer, they retain their value for longer. That's just one of the reasons. I'm sure there are many others. So to give you an example, we imported our car from the UK, which is a right-hand drive coming to a left-hand drive country. Now that cost us in the region of 3,000 British pounds to do that. That was everything. That's from driving over here, what we had to pay to get it over here, and also because it was a right-hand drive and we had to change it to a left-hand drive, about half of that cost was down to putting new headlights in that are pointing in the right direction. And a couple of other changes that we had to do to the vehicle as well, minor changes. So £1,500 is not an unreasonable amount to get a car matriculated into Portugal from somewhere like the UK. Now, if we'd have bought the same car, an equivalent car that we brought over, which had a value of about £3,500 in the UK, it would have cost us probably in the region of 10,000 to 11,000 UK pounds to buy a replacement car equivalent here in Portugal, used, same year, etc, etc, and that's a 2012 vehicle. Okay, so used cars, yeah, I think really whoa, we nearly lost you there. It's a little blowy up here. What you maybe want to look for are the best places to, I'm going to have to hold on to you so the wind doesn't blow you over. Stand Virtual is a good online resource, and that's a kind of a place where all the dealers will they'll advertise on there. So it's a great place to go, an online resource where you can look for used vehicles. Again, it really does depend on what you're looking for. We have heard that cars are a little bit cheaper the further north you go, but we can't really comment on that. We've just heard that that is the case. But there are other things like Facebook groups. Another great place to look is where you've got immigrants who are perhaps leaving Portugal, and they're gonna leave cars, or not leave them, they're gonna sell their cars on. And quite often, if they're older cars, then they don't want quite as much for them. But obviously, if you're buying privately, then you don't really have the protection of like Stand Virtual, where you're at least gonna get some kind of warranty protection from the dealer there. So yeah, buying cars, I'm not gonna say it's a minefield. You certainly need to have your wits about you. And obviously, as we say, used cars, they are going to be more expensive probably than where you've come from. Thank you very much for watching. That will be it for this week. We do hope you got something out of it. We do intend to do more Q&A sessions in the future, dependent on the amount of questions that we get from the people watching these videos. We enjoy doing that, and we love helping others. So that's it for this week. As I say, we will see you next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a comment, and we will see you next week.
Ta-ra for now.
Oh, I love the coordinated ta-ra for now.